Hello, and welcome to my second IMMO, which is a different format than the other ones. The other videos I've been making are about the tenets of the Singularity Codex lately, and they're more kind of step by step. I might jot down a few notes before I talk so I keep myself on track. But these videos here are just my opinion videos, and I don't really even try to prepare for them. I just will pick a topic that I think is interesting, and I'll try to give my natural and organic opinion on the matter. So, today I'm going to be talking about heaven, hell, and all that stuff, which is pretty. It's a pretty wide range of topics, but we'll try to keep the video 20 minutes or less. So, heaven and hell are places or at least concepts that are seen across many religions and many cultures throughout history. You look at Greek. You look at we talked about the Greek gods in our first MMO. Um, they had a underworld where souls would go, and they also had situations where souls would have eternal punishment in other ways and in other different places that weren't necessarily in Hades, but it was definitely a real place to the Greeks that they believed in and that they thought, you know, if you when you die, that's where you go usually. And it was rather bleak for the most part. And of course, if you look at the Abrahamic religions, they believe in the dual heaven and hell concept, where if you're righteous and you follow your God's commands and you do the right things, you go to heaven. And if you don't, then you go to hell. And they're both eternal and they both suck. So I would say that, of course, there's many different variations of add-ons to this. If you look at purgatory, um, in Catholicism, where it's kind of like an intermediate place where you screwed up a bit, but you're supposed to, go through some trials and learn, so that way you can go to heaven. Um, which actually is kind of productive if you were to look at these concepts just straight up and say, okay, well, if you were designing a system for, and you wanted it to not be insane and crazy for justice in the universe, how would that be done? Because you first would have to think, what is the purpose of justice? Well, it's to make sure that wrongness is corrected. And I think that so often we, as people in the world that we've all grown up in, think of justice as you're hurting somebody because they hurt somebody else. You put them in prison or something. You execute them in certain circumstances. And it's very rare that we think about it as, well, justice is righting the wrongs of the universe that are done to it. So I don't necessarily think that real justice is done when you harm the individual who harmed the person just for the sake of being even. Putting somebody in prison might make them reflect on stuff, but torturing them is not going to make them anything except scared. And people might say, well, yeah, that's great. We want them to be scared so they don't do that again. It's like, well, no, that's true if you're failing at the main priority, which is to help them understand what they did wrong, and furthermore help them correct that in the universe. And if you can't bring somebody back to life, you can go and you can have a positive impact on lots and lots of people and souls, because you now have an understanding of what needs to happen. Now, I get it. There's people who have all sorts of really deep problems that you just can't really convince of anything, no matter how beautiful you make it sound. But they are unfortunate circumstances. And I do think it's okay for those types of people to have to deal with a type of purgatory situation if we're going to talk about when they die and go to the afterlife. I don't want to make this about a justice system on earth. This is about heaven and hell and other places like that. So the the concept of when you die, if you were good, you go to heaven or a good place like heaven. And if you were bad and you did a lot more evil things than good things, then you go to hell. Well, it makes sense if you, like I said, don't think about justice as healing the universe, but rather as punishing people for being bad. And I like to think that if these were places that were constructed in some way by a intelligent being, that the being at this point in its existence, whatever it is or whatever they are that did this, would. By the way, I'm not saying anything did or didn't do anything or that it even exists at all. Okay, there's so many possibilities for everything. What I wrote in the Singularity Codex is what I genuinely believe. So if you want my solid opinion that is unwaverable, go there. But as far as all the extra possibilities of how things could work, I don't rule anything out. So let's just say for a second that there is an intelligent consciousness that created um, afterlife realms. So that way, when souls die, sorry, when organic life forms die, their souls get pulled towards the direction of this, maybe by some resonant attuning that draws you in, or maybe there could be a lot of ways it happens. But the fact is, if this being is I guess you could say powerful enough to construct these types of realities or realms or dimensions, or at least do things in these dimensions, then you would think that it was probably also intelligent enough to understand why a place of eternal suffering isn't very productive for anyone. Um, there's not really anything good that comes out of a place where there's no chance of redemption and no forward progress. I mean, if you guys have heard any near death experience stories that talk about hellish experiences, there's some pretty crazy stuff that these people experience, and you can see it in their eyes that whether it was real in the sense that we would understand it or not, it was very real to them, and it was usually what you hear about those places is nothing good at all. There's no good coming out of those places, um, because there's so much pain and suffering and torment that you just can't get better. You can't do anything. It's just stagnation and pain. And those are the opposite things. We want expression beyond pain. And when I say beyond pain, it's we are doing what we can to minimize pain in the universe so that way it's our expression is transcendent of these things. We don't want to express ourselves in pain, pained ways, because usually if you're expressing yourself from pain, there's either sadness in that or there's anger in that. um, and those aren't things that the universe wants to feel, and deep down inside those aren't things that any of us want to feel. So I would say, unless there's something really evil in charge of everything, eternal hell is not a thing that exists in the way it's described. I would say that there's probably dimensions that have all sorts of craziness going on. If you think about, some I've had some conversations with people, and I've asked them, "Do you believe in hell?" And they say no. I say, "Okay, well, let's look at the giant scope of the universe, right? And all these places that could potentially exist. Do you think that Earth is the worst place?" And they will also say no. And to which I reply, "Right. So why is it impossible that there could be some other part of reality where a bunch of bad negative energy kind of coalesces and creates this really dark dimension that people who are attuned to negative frequencies they kind of get pulled into it? Like I said, it's kind of like their soul is a song, and it gets pulled towards the radio station, which in this case is the dimension, which is a place that people call hell. And I think the reason people get stuck there, assuming that this is really a place and not just um, like a DMT manifestation of people when they're dying and newly dead. But if this is a place, then there's nothing good coming out of it, but that doesn't mean there's nothing good going into it, and that's kind of a very scary thought. Because when people get there, they become so immersed in the wrong that they have done. They become so guilty, and they become so condemned by their own actions because they get to see how they really were. And in life, a lot of people ignore how they really are because they're so focused on, oh, I don't got time to feel that. And they just keep going, and they keep breaking everything in their path until they die. And then they look at themselves and they're disgusted because they're no longer connected to that node of reality, which is us, humans body, like the human body that we live in. And there's nothing to stop them from seeing it all for how it really happened. And the problem is, the way it really happened can be viewed from 1,000 perspectives, and none of them are necessarily wrong as long as you're accounting for all factors and variables. So that person didn't do enough to convince themselves that they were worth having a good existence after they died. That's my opinion anyway. It seems to me that people get sucked into this place or these various places that have similar bad vibes, and they get trapped there because the density of the place kind of, it's like I've spoken of the illness of the universe and how it's kind of like intrusive thoughts in a way that weave themselves into different things. I think that in a way that conscious force there is very oppressive on people, and it stops them, or at least very much inhibits them from really hoping for any truth or redemption, and they just get caught up in this negative downward spiral. I mean, think about it. If you've ever been depressed and you're kind of just there alone and you just keep going into this downward spiral, what's going to pull you out of it? Your thoughts don't pull you out of it. You kind of just go until something, either you get interrupted or you find a way to snap out of it. But what if the place around you was literally so vile and just dark that, apart from the own darkness that you feel in yourself, you feel this external force that almost is inducing it upon you? It takes a very, very powerful soul to stand up in that circumstance, to stand up in that ultimate pain and say, this isn't right. I know that I'm bad. I know that I've done bad things, and I'm sorry. And I don't want to do those things. And I can see the truth now. But what good is any of it if I'm locked down here in this hellhole and I can't give anything good back to the universe to right my wrongs? And I bet you that there are ways out of this place. Now, I've heard that when people cry out to God from this place, that now, like I said, these are people who have had near death experiences and come back to life, and so they've only been dead for a short period of time. We don't know if this really is real, as we would call it, or if this is more of a quantum dream that's happening after the brain that's understood is no longer functioning, but then is resuscitated shortly afterwards. So, but I'm telling you that in their eyes, and it was real to them. So I know that people call on God and they get brought up to a better place and they get shown a lot of interesting things. But then usually what happens is, as they're getting resuscitated, they have to go back, and they usually don't have a choice. And I think that's because their body's physically getting resuscitated, and it kind of pulls them back into it and makes you wake back up with your real brain, your physical brain, um, and your physical body. So, with all that said, I think that religions have used the concept of this eternal hell of no redemption to really scare the crap out of a lot of people. And if you are a person listening to this who has faith in something, that's a Abrahamic religion, so Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, I encourage you to think about, would it really make sense for a God to create an eternal hell with no chance of redemption once you're there, when the entire universe feels everything that happens to everybody, including the people in hell? And I would also ask, everybody if your faith in whatever you believe in is based on fear, because it's very important that it's not. Straight up, it is important that your faith is not based on fear, whatever you believe in. Because if it's based on fear, you aren't really doing things for the right reason. You should do things because you see it all, because you see how things really work, and that you see it's united and it's unified and it's together, and that we are all part of the same body, and that we're all cells who need to do the job that we are individually are special at doing. And we discover what that is, and we embrace it, and we grow, and we add new things to that, and we are kind to people as much as we can be the whole way through, so that way we get to be our true selves as much as we can be on earth, and we get to make other people happy along the way. And so if everybody does that, then we don't need to worry about a concept of hell, because you're doing things because you know it's good, and because you know, like, this is the real way of the universe. And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be afraid of hell. You should be afraid of why you don't care about the thing that you are a part of. Because as I've used the analogy before, that's called cancer. When you think you're your own thing that wants to make more of itself and doesn't care about the repercussions that it causes, that is literally the concept of cancer in the body. So if you want to be cancer, live in fear and do good to people because you're scared of burning, because that's basically the extent of what you are. But if you do things because you want to make people happy, you want to make the universe feel better, you want everything to be well and right, then that is you doing your job as a cell in the universal body. So do not live in fear of hell or suffering, and do not live in desire of a reward from heaven. Because when you do these things, you are living in fear and greed. Greed for your mansion in heaven, and fear of the fires of hell. When in reality, that's just not how the universe works. It's how men who wrote stuff down a long time ago think things work, and the eyes of the universe see beyond these lies. And I'm telling you that expression beyond pain is important, and making sure that each of us lives free of fear to the extent of that's possible. We need to live free of fear, and we need to embrace the truth of goodness and love. And it sounds tacky, but when you do it and people do it to you, it doesn't feel tacky. It feels like the realest thing you've experienced. So, yeah, basically, to before we run out of time, I just will recap. I think that there's probably bad places in the universe and good places in the universe. And I think that what you do and how you see yourself impacts that. And I think that you are, in a way, your own judge. And if you're trying to, if you were an evil person and you're trying to convince yourself that you were good, you're not going to be able to fool yourself, because you're going to see all the variables. But if you don't think about it that way and say, I want to do better, I want to right my wrongs, because not because I want to be out of this hellfire, but because I want to help fix the universe that I helped break. And when you do that, that's how you get out of hell, in my opinion. And if you don't live in fear, and you know that you're doing good things for people, and you try your hardest, and you follow the tenets that, and just the things in general from the Singularity Codex, and whatever parts of your religions across the world that say be good, be kind to one another, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you're doing the right stuff. We don't need to worry about anything else. We don't need to worry about, well, you have to believe in this, you have to do this. No, know who you are, and know why you're doing it, and have it not be in fear. And I think that way, when all of us pass on from here, we'll be able to, one way or the other, get ourselves to a positive place. So thank you for listening today. And I hope that my opinion has not pissed you off too much, but rather given you some reflection, and maybe you even liked it. So thank you, and I will continue to upload videos about the last two tenets, 6 and 7, of the Singularity Codex, but I wanted to break it up a little bit and have one of these videos because I feel like they're just a little bit more fun. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.